We mentioned the story the other day about the NCAA saying that they are going to speed up investigations. This has been a common conversation we've had with our next guest, Mark Schlabach, who has done some outstanding investigative reporting for ESPN over the years, oftentimes waiting forever to see if the NCAA ever does anything with these cases. Mark, thanks for the time. Great to have you back on the program. So what are we hearing now from the NCAA, that they're going to do what?
They introduced this independent accountability resolution process to handle these complex cases that involve major infractions. And, it was a part of the recommendations from the Basketball Commission headed by Condoleezza Rice. And lo and behold, instead of making things easier, talking to people involved, it's added, a year to 18 months of layers to it, additional layers to it. And now they're going to allow the complex case unit, which is a team of investigators and attorneys, to accept what the enforcement staff found during their investigation and accept that as evidence and not have to reinvestigate everything.
So let's talk about some of these cases that I know you've done a lot of reporting on that just continue to hang out there seemingly forever. In terms of some of the ones that come to mind, I mean, there are a bunch of really well-known ones. How long are these cases go on for, Mark?
Well, I mean, we're going on over a year on most of them since they were accepted by the IARP. I've been told that the only school involved in the federal investigation with the basketball bribes that currently has a hearing scheduled is NC State, which I believe is going to take place next week. So, I mean, the attorneys and other people involved in these cases tell me that most of these probably aren't going to be resolved until sometime next year.
And we're talking some pretty well-known cases, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, we're talking Kansas, Arizona, LSU, Louisville, NC State. Auburn went the traditional route through the Committee on Infractions. Jonathan Duncan, the head of NCAA enforcement, told me earlier this year that all of those cases would be fully adjudicated by the end of the year. So I can only assume that Auburn has gone in front of the Committee on Infractions. But, Auburn typically doesn't tell me much.
What other case to ask you about? I want to get to a couple other subjects, and it's been out there since January, and that's the case involving Tennessee. Nobody seems to know which way it's going. Have you heard anything lately?
I haven't. I mean, I would assume the magnitude of it, that it might be referred to the IARP, but since you already had the chancellor from Tennessee saying during a press conference that it was major violations and multiple violations, I assume that maybe they're more cooperative than some of these schools have been that were involved in the basketball cases. But we reported it was multiple violations and serious violations.
Talking to Mark Schlabach from ESPN. Mark, I realize the two don't necessarily connect, but now that it seems like with NIL you can almost get away with anything, do you think that overall is going to change the attitude of universities toward compliance? It seems like it's already changed the view of the fans.
No, I think the ship has sailed. The federal indictments came down in September of 2017 for the basketball bribery case. So here we are nearly 4 years later. And, some schools that weren't as serious, but that had some assistant coaches that took bribes, USC, South Carolina, Alabama, TCU, and others have gotten punishment. Some have gotten postseason bans, Oklahoma State, and others, got slaps on the wrist. But, I just think the public perception is that kids should be paid, and that the public opinion on it has taken a 180. And I had an SEC athletic director tell me about 2 weeks ago, Paul, when we were talking about super conferences and everything else. He said, "I hope we have a commissioner, and I hope we have a 5-page rule book that only deals with academic fraud, because that's about the only thing that matters anymore."
There's so many tempting questions to follow up, Mark, but I mean, you've done this for a long time in terms of reporting and watching and seeing the way the wind blows. How would you characterize college football right now, in just from the coaching standpoint, in relation to I don't want to say caring, because you have to care, but being overly concerned about the rules?
Well, I think clearly NIL changed everything. The transfer portal changed everything. As dirty as the recruiting was from a high school prospect standpoint, I think it's probably going to get worse. Guys trying to poach kids off other people's teams. I think that's why Greg Sankey fought so hard to keep the 1 year penalty for transferring within the conference in place. I mean, he has enough problems dealing with his guys when they're recruiting high school kids, and he doesn't want kids jumping from SEC school to SEC school. But lo and behold, that rule's gone. So I think people being offended or appalled by $500 handshakes, that day's come and gone. I mean, it's a completely different world. And I heard Kirby Smart talking earlier today that his responsibilities and the scope of his profession has completely changed, and it's not why he got into the program or into the profession. But he's gone from a coach to a manager, and they're having to deal with NILs and everything else.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.